It's great to see the Melbourne Queer Film Festival is coming up for its 33rd incarnation from November 9th to the 19th. And it's my great pleasure to be speaking to the new artistic director of the Melbourne Queer Film Festival, Cerise Howard. Cerise, welcome to Movie Metropolis again.
Thanks, Peter. Lovely to be back here this time in a different role, attached to a different organisation.
That's right. And how interesting that you're now the artistic director. What were the challenges that you faced coming into the running the or finding the programming, if you like, for the Melbourne Queer Film Festival?
Oh, a few challenges. I mean, part of it is that this is a festival of significantly bigger proportions than the Czech and Slovak Film Festival that I had been artistic director of for 6 years, and even that's actually a few years ago. I mean, Melbourne Queer Film Festival this will be its 33rd edition. It's a very established festival, and it runs a great many more sessions than the Czech and Slovak Film Festival, and in a way has to do right by a broader cross section of a community that even within itself, I think, is broader than many people grasp. And when we think of the ever-growing alphabet, sometimes the alphabet soup, as we call it, the LGBTIQA+, mindful of that plus, it's an expanding group. The more identities that are not exactly emerging, I mean, we've always been here, always been around, but the more identities that are, let's say, asserting themselves and intersecting with one another to produce more letters for that lovely alphabet soup, the more, in a way, that a role like mine is challenging, because everyone wants to see some degree of representation of themselves on screen in a festival like this. It doesn't mean it always needs to be somehow unambiguously positive representation, but we just need to see something of people's lived experiences across that broad cross-section of a broad community. Need to see that on the big screen for it to resonate with those members of sometimes quite marginalized communities.
Absolutely, no, absolutely understand that. And you've programmed films from around the world. I mean, it's so great to see, as always, films from other countries, including from Australia. So, I mean, getting hold of those films and being able to screen them is always a task.
Well, it certainly is that, Peter. It's a task with a tremendous amount of admin attached to it. There are a lot of spreadsheets, and there are a lot of emails going back and forth, negotiating terms.
Yeah.
Oftentimes a film might have been shot somewhere, set somewhere, but the rights for it are held somewhere very differently again. There are so many players attached to any given film. And some of these films range from the micro budget productions where we're speaking with the filmmakers directly in order to secure their films, or they've submitted to the festival, or in some instances we're dealing with some major studios and distributors. So it's a festival that engages with that complete film distribution landscape, and it's a complex landscape and ever evolving in its way as well. But generally, we find that people want their films to be seen. That's a rule of thumb. So there's always a conversation to be had, and with any given potential provider of films, and then it's just about the nitty gritty. How much for how many screenings, and what sort of cinemas with what sort of capacity. Will there be guests present? And we always hope so, wherever possible. It's a lot.
It is a lot. I absolutely understand that process of being part of it for with the German Film Festival and so on. Anyway, so MQFF this year is at a number of venues: Kino, Nova, Jam Factory, Capitol, the Pride Rooftop. So it's great of the number of venues, and you've called the festival Rewind to Fast Forward, which I find at the launch quite intriguing.
Yeah, well, this speaks to something a philosophy, you could say, quite dear to me on a couple of fronts. So as a co-curator of the Melbourne Cinematheque for several years, I'm, of course, interested in the history of film, and as a member of the queer community now, acting as a program director for a queer film festival, I'm also very interested in the history of our community's representation on film, and feel that there needs to be more time given to it in festivals like ours, the better, to put out loud and clearly, or I should say loudly and proudly, the messaging that queer people have been around since time immemorial, across cultures, across all the whole planet. We are ubiquitous, and it's part of it is to counter some nonsense that has been propagated in certain areas of the media in recent times, suggesting that especially manifestations of gender diversity are somehow a new idea and threatening. There's been a lot of demonizing of gender diverse people and trans people and drag performers, even in seemingly very progressive Melbourne in the last couple of years. And so we thought, well, in order to move forward, sometimes we also need to look backward and remind ourselves that, and remind everyone else, that we've always been around, and there's plenty to testify to this. And this moving image art form we all love, called cinema, usually dated back to around 1895. Well, it's shown that we've been here all this time as well, and that's why we launched this festival with a grand gesture and a wonderful occasion in and of itself. We took over the Melbourne Town Hall, as grand a civic space as can be obtained for an occasion, and we had a silent era film, a drag comedy from 1918 from director Ernst Lubitsch, I Don't Want to Be a Man, and leaned heavily into the symbolism of reclaiming some civic spaces that actually a lot of drag community and gender diverse community have been denied this year through libraries and councils having to cancel events in the face of threatening behavior by some fringe elements in our society. So that's all in the mix. And then when we look at some of the venues we're using this year, the Astor Theatre is our opening and closing night venue, and that's been an opening night venue in MQFFs of yesteryear. So in a way, we're enjoying that nostalgic return to that gorgeous Art Deco edifice in St Kilda, and the grand old capital as well, a place very dear to my heart. There's a lot of ways in which we're looking back in order to also be in the now and feel very present in now, and to move forward. And hence also a greater selection than usual of retrospective programming, some film classics underseen or well known but not seen around these parts for too long.
Absolutely. I saw those retrospective films. I mean, Glen or Glenda, Head On, La Cage aux Folles, the original French version, and so on.
Mm-hmm.
Such interesting films. So great that you've programmed them.
Well, I think people, whether they've seen them or not, will get a huge kick out of seeing these films. There'll be an education, and I don't mean that in a dull or didactic sort of way. I think they'll be very illuminating for a lot of people to see how queer folk have been represented on screen in bygone years, especially by other queer folk. Even with a film as often mocked as Glen or Glenda, but it's actually a landmark film in terms of trans representation. And La Cage aux Folles, a classic Italian drag comedy that, of course, Hollywood remade as The Birdcage, also a very popular film in its time, and I think still much adored. And a number of other great retrospective titles from around the world as well. So I'm thrilled to be able to bring that dimension to MQFF's programming.
Well done on that. That's terrific that you did that. Now, let's talk about some of the films. First of all, the opening night film at the Astor, I Love You, Bexman. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, I really adore this film. It's from the Philippines, so kind of from the neighborhood. It's a very campy, colorful, high energy rom-com with a very wonderful queer twist, um, which is that in a very queer family, a young presumed gay, very flamboyant hairdresser and makeup artist tries to come out to his chosen family and actual family as straight, and they're not having it. They cannot fathom how this could possibly be true. And it's just a delightful inversion of all of the classic rom-com tropes, and has a great deal of fun with unpacking all sorts of ways in which gender is performed and read or misread. And it's just absolutely delightful, very funny. And I think a lot of people would be surprised to find how moving it is as well. And we'll have the director, Percy Interlam, here for that. So I'm really delighted that that's all landed, and it's an Australian premiere, and I think it'll go gangbusters.
Excellent. I'm sure it will. And the closing film at the Astor is a Canadian film called Solo.
Yes, that's a hot title from the very recently staged Toronto International Film Festival. It's set in the drag community in Montreal, and while I Love You, Bexman is pitched in this sort of high camp register, Solo, despite you might think being set in a milieu where it's all going to be campy and catty, is actually really grounded in something very authentic. It's more of a drama. There's some comedy in there, but it's I'd call it a drama more than a dramedy even. Fantastic performances, some great drag performances within the film, but ultimately it's a story about a young man, young drag performer, just trying to come to terms with some difficult relationships in his life, with an absent mother and with a somewhat narcissistic partner in art and in love. And it's just it's such a terrific film. It's I think it'll resonate with people very well, no matter how they identify, because it's just a great human story. And when we'll chase that down to close out the festival, of course, again with a big party at the Astor, and there will be, I think it's not spoiling things too much to telegraph that we'll have some drag performers roaming the foyer. And I should add actually that both of those events, the tickets are being sold at the same price as any ordinary event. So I would urge people to take advantage of that, and let's pack the Astor out and make this festive as festive can be.
Absolutely, and that sounds great that you've limited the costs and so on. So that's well done on that. I noticed Goran Stolevski's
Yeah.
latest film, and I spoke to him about Of an Age, but Housekeeping for Beginners.
Yes, well, that's another hot ticket. So Goran is a Melbourne-based filmmaker, but this film, unlike Of an Age, is set and shot in North Macedonia. It's kind of a pan-Eastern European production. There might be, I think Sweden is in the mix there somewhere as well. Just a classic European production with all manner of different nations involved in the production, but it ultimately feels very North Macedonian, very much about a household peopled with queer folks coming and going, and Romani folks, and it's energetic and chaotic as life there is sometimes wont to be. It feels so Eastern European, but it also feels like the work of the same filmmaker. That sensibility and sensitivity that he displayed in Of an Age is there in abundance as well. And the film's already been gaining a lot of plaudits. It won the prestigious Queer Lion Award at the Venice Film Festival, where it had its international premiere. It's just done very well over in Adelaide, and we've got its Victorian premiere, and we'll be screening it a couple of times. And delighted to add that Goran will be present to introduce the first of those screenings and to conduct a masterclass in the salon at the Capitol the day after that first screening. So to dispense some of that hard-earned wisdom, because he was making shorts for something like 20 years before all of a sudden 3 features in about as many years. So it's been a long build-up, and now I think he's basically unstoppable.
Yep. Absolutely. Oh, that's great that he's doing all that. That's fantastic. I notice I've only got about 7 minutes left, so I'd better keep going. I notice Passages, an Ira Sachs film with German actor Franz Rogowski in the lead.
Oh, what a great film! And yes, and Ben Whishaw as well, and Adele Exarchopoulos. It's we could sort of call it a bizarre love triangle setup. This one is a dramedy. I was hesitant to use that term for an earlier film we've discussed, but this does lean heavily into comedy at times. Yes, Franz Rogowski's character is absolutely captivating, but somewhat appalling, but so charismatic. It's just a tremendous, very sexy French film about bisexuality and about bad behavior. It had a couple of screenings at MIF, but I thought it just has to go in our program as well, to play to a predominantly queer audience who will, I think, receive it a little differently, but I'm sure at every bit as enthusiastically as it was received at MIF. It's just a fantastic film, and he's a terrific filmmaker.
Excellent stuff. And All of Us Strangers, I noticed, with Paul Mescal.
Oh my God, that film. Yeah, that film very accurately and memorably described by I think David Ehrlich was the critic, as a nuclear grade tearjerker. It's an incredibly affecting film. A little bit of a magic realist number, set in a contemporary London, except there seems to be some sort of a time slippage whereby one of the principal characters, played by Andrew Scott, who some people seem to know very well as the hot priest from Fleabag, he seems somehow to be able to visit his deceased parents, notwithstanding that they died 30 years ago. And and at the same time, he's got this burgeoning relationship with Paul Mescal's character. And the two of them are the only inhabitants of a very large tower block in London. We don't ever know exactly why no one else seems to live there. It's just how it is. And oh gosh, it's just such a very powerful, beautiful film. I don't think I've been as affected by another film to that to that extent for really some years. I found it profoundly moving.
Okay.
Both sold out already, so terrific, incredible film.
Okay. Look, I don't have much time left, but there's so many other films, and we should mention short films as always, and industry events that you've programmed and so on.
Yes, there's something in there for aspiring and emerging filmmakers to tap into. There'll be panels there with people representing the various areas of the film cultural landscape. So if you're an up-and-coming filmmaker, you can hear from emerging filmmakers like Alice Meyer McKay, who at the age of 18 is onto her 5th feature film already.
Oh.
We're screening her 3rd and 4th film. She's just phenomenal. But then also, a veteran filmmaker like Tony Ayres, but also Lisa Rose, the festival director at Mardi Gras Film Festival, and Davey Thompson from Vic Screen, who can speak to how funding bodies can help queer filmmakers and First Nations filmmakers. That's part of Davey's ambit there as well. So there's a sort of a social mix element to that too. So there's that's a free to attend event. Just need to register on the website. So doing our little bit to platform emerging filmmakers, give them a leg up, and get them all meeting and hopefully collaborating soon after.
Terrific. Now, if people want to get tickets, if they go to the mqff.com.au website, I suppose that's the best launching pad for them. That'll do it. Either that or download the MQFF app. They're the 2 best ways. Yep. Terrific. Look, congratulations, Cerise, on taking over the artistic direction of Melbourne Queer Film Festival. And you've certainly programmed a diverse festival indeed for audiences. So well done.
Thanks so much, Peter. And it's happening very soon, and it's very real. And I'm looking forward to it. Yes, very soon now. So thank you.
Absolutely. So November 9th to the 19th for the Melbourne Queer Film Festival, and we've been speaking to Cerise Howard, the artistic director of this year's festival. Cerise, thank you so much for talking with me.
Thanks so much, Peter, for the invitation too. Thank you.
Pleasure. All the best. Bye-bye.